The first game is legendary, and it is just goddamn good in so many regards that people were wondering what would they do for the sequel. Unfortunately, the sequel would be as safe as you can get, and honestly, it isn't as amazing as the first game by its own right, but I don't think it hits the same as the first one, in my honest opinion. I know the game is amazing. It's truly a lovely game. I love it. Recently, they just put out the update for New Game Plus and so much more. However, the overall, the base game, the game without the New Game Plus, without you feeling Spider-Man 100% through with all your stuff, to me, it just doesn't hit the same as the first one. To start off with everything, let's start off with talking about the story. My favorite thing to talk about, right, everybody? But I think the story for Spider-Man 2 is pretty good. However, I think it doesn't compare with the first one. Now, hold on. Don't destroy me yet. The first one had an amazing story and dealing with so much emotional stuff that happened. It's great. It honestly is great. But the first one just hit entirely different than the second one. The decision to make Harry Venom is fine and all, and I guess we're gonna fight him again as the Green Goblin, since he's gonna be taking the serum. I don't know about that, honestly. I really don't. It's a little weird to me that we might be fighting him again. But if they have it to where Norman is going to go ahead and use the serum first to kind of proof it, because he doesn't want to lose Harry, even, at the risk of possibly being disfigured, and, if, depending on which version, they turn him into, they could turn him into the ultimate Green Goblin, where he actually turns into a giant goblin that can fly and destroy things. That would be pretty baller. But if he's just superhuman and, just turns evil and has a split personality, that's good too. If they go with that route, that is fine. I would love that. That's something I would prefer. But I just don't want to fight Harry again at all. Like, he had his time in the limelight. Maybe be Hobgoblin at some point. I don't know. However, I just don't want to fight him again unless there's an actual really good reason for us to fight him again. Like, we kill Norman and he turns into the pseudo Green Goblin and tries to kill us, right? That's a better reason. First, let's talk about the story. My favorite thing to talk about, right? I think the story is pretty good. However, I don't think it compares to the first, especially with how it in tandem works with the gameplay and the world set that is New York. I don't think it does it well and does it as, so engagingly as the first one. The decision to make Harry Venom is fine, right? But I suppose he's going to get the Green Goblin serum in the next game, and I just don't want to fight him again. Like, seriously. If they have it to where Norman will go ahead and use the serum on himself to make sure that it is safe, and he turns into the Goblin, I would prefer the Ultimate Spider-Man one, where he actually turns into a big old goblin with wings and everything to beat the shit out of Spider-Man, Miles, and potentially Silk. I think that would be pretty goddamn baller. But if he's just, just big old giga super guy with a personality disorder, then that's fine with me too. But I prefer that than just having to fight Harry again in some sort of Green Goblin abomination like Amazing Spider-Man 2. No, I don't want that. Something else I also want to note is the decision to kill off Peter's iconic villains. It's pretty damn weird and odd. Like these villains here are synonymous with Spider-Man, right? So killing a good portion of them off is sort of it's out there, right? It's out there. So what are they gonna have Peter, Miles, or Silk gonna do? Are they gonna fight all new enemies, all new sort of, I don't know, iconic villains that aren't dead, right? So I don't know what's going on here. Are they gonna retcon anything? I don't know what's going on. As well as, is Peter gonna be like sort of like a seasonal hero that we sort of play every now and then to sort of get hyped for, to see the OG like Spider-Man around? Or is it's just going to be 3 spider people that we're going to play, potentially Silk, right? Is Silk going to be Miles' second in command now that Miles has been promoted from, just around the neighborhood Spider-Man to friendly neighborhood Spider-Man that's all over the place now. Like, what's the deal here? Something I also think is that the first game story that has the city change along with the events of it was great. It was honestly one of the best aspects of the first game. But I really don't see that here in the second game. Sure, we antagonized the shit out of the hunters, but it didn't really do anything, right? Like, it was felt like just busy work and just stuff to do. The stuff with the chameleon was honestly pretty cool, like, but it didn't lead anywhere. So it kind of just left me wanting, right? And the stuff with the symbiotes running amok, that was cool, but that was super late game. And sure, it changed the city a good bit, right? But that was just for story reasons, of course. But it didn't really last long, and it just didn't feel all too like when it comes to the first game, when you're dealing with the absolute chaos of the Sable criminals and demons all over the place, going to war. It was so interesting to see these factions going to war and trying to stop everything. It felt like the whole setting of the game, like you had so much on your shoulders to help fix and do. There's none of that really there at late game when it comes to the symbiotes in the second one, right? So I feel like that's where the first game takes it a step higher than the second game. When it comes to the story of the second one, the deeper story with Peter becoming a fucking dick because of the symbiote was fun to see and experience. But I felt that much of the reactions to the suit were really touch and go. Harry having the symbiote just basically just given to Peter was very apparent here. I feel like it could have been done differently or better, but it was still very emotional and pretty decent the way it happened, especially with Peter getting stabbed and all, right? I think what was a shame was Miles and his story sort of being non-existent, just him trying to be there for Peter, trying to think of a way to express his feelings to the girl he likes, and his paper, that's really it. It wasn't really that much interesting on his side of the game. Even his side quests were very mid to not really interesting. It just felt like busy work and just stuff to do. It didn't feel like stuff you feel inclined to do because you're a good person, right? These people that you're playing are good people, right? And it didn't feel like you were doing good. It just felt like you were doing just menial tasks just to keep you in the loop, just to keep you busy in the game, if that makes sense. A little bit of story that was cooking up in my head when I was like thinking about like what potential storylines and sort of stories they could tell before the game even came out. I was just thinking about some of this, right? And it could have been interesting to see Peter, who would get in contact with the suit through Connor's lab, and he was trying to investigate how Harry got better, but is acting different, like Goblin serum different, right? And that he has been taking to sort of counteract the whole like disease that he has. At the same time, we would be introduced to Eddie Brock, who is a friend or foe, depending on which version you would like the story to go in. And he would take up Peter's former role as the Beagle's lead photographer for Spider-Man. His pictures wouldn't be as good as Peter's, and people would compare his and Peter's and make him very jealous and angry towards Peter. And I think that would be pretty understandable, since Peter makes some pretty crazy shots, apparently, because he's Spider-Man, of course. I wanted to also add some stuff for Miles to deal with, and I think him grappling with the fact that his mother has sort of moved on from the death of his father and found somebody that makes her happy. And while sort of dealing with this, he would unexpectedly find another spider person that isn't Peter, that is around and helping out. And the more he investigates, the more he finds that the person is closer to him than he thinks. Silk could be introduced in this way. I think it would be pretty cool, and possibly drive a wedge between Miles and Genki unintentionally. Genki would grow more annoyed and frustrated at how much attention Miles is getting and how much more interesting his life is compared to Genki, of course. These are kids after all, so all these emotions and sort of drama going on is natural, of course. And I think it would make for some great sort of meat on the storyline, I suppose, than just grappling with his emotions towards the girl that he likes, a paper, and being there for Peter, who constantly ignores him. I think this would be a much better storyline to get into Silk's sort of like origin, and Genki's whole sort of like storyline, as well as Miles just getting more character development. I think that would be pretty goddamn good, honestly, because Miles in the second game, he got the new suit, and he finally got the girl, and it just felt like it was all just stupid crap that could have been done in one side mission for each sort of problem. But whatever, moving on. For me, when it comes to like the first one, I think it did better with like involving the story and the characters and the different factions in the setting, and the overall chaos it induced was better in the first one. In the second one, I believe that if they had it to where Kraven and his hunters out and about causing so many problems, to try and gain the favor of the people, Norman would utilize his security force like Sable, but have them like utilize tech reminiscent of Goblin tech to combat them. Slowly, as the game progresses, and plunge the city into more fighting, where even the police would be siding with the security force to get rid of the hunters, who by then would start to dwindle in number. I definitely did like how Spider-Man 2 had the symbiotes take people over, so when Peter needs to take off the suit, Brock would be the one to find it and, get attached to it. He would break into Connor's lab and turn the city into symbiote hell, I suppose. With this, Miles and Peter would work together to defeat Venom and take off the suit away from Brock, and with the coaching from Harry, Norman would offer up his assistance to finally defeat Venom for good. If they would win, Peter and MJ think of the future and so on, and the Emily May storyline with Peter and Harry can stay because it was honestly a really nice sort of part of the second game. I really like that a lot. I think that sort of simple setup for the story would be fine and a tad bit more interesting than the story we got in here, which was sort of predictable. Like, come on now, like Harry comes out of nowhere, super strength, and we're not suspecting that he's going to be the big bad evil guy, I suppose. I was not expecting him to munch off Kraven's head though. That was new. That was cool. I like that. I will say though, again, I feel like the side missions were a bit lackluster. I feel like most were just busy work for the player. The storyline with the Chameleon could have been really cool if they had, followed it through to where you followed him where he infiltrates the Avengers Tower, Osborn Industries, the Daily Bugle, and to find the Chameleon, who is trying to get more information on heroes and their secret identities. And I think that would be pretty goddamn baller. Most of the missions for either Spider-Man felt like really minor stories that can go without any sort of change to your experience when playing a game. And I think that is really saddening to see and experience, because each side mission should go ahead and open more perspective for the main story, or just help open up more doors when playing the main story. That's how I feel side missions should be like. Something I do feel very passionately is that the whole Flame storyline should have played a bigger part in the main storyline for me. I think both storylines should have melded together into its own, or at least interacted at some point, right? Instead of just like little side missions where the people of the Flame just attack like symbiote people out in the open, and you just have to fight both, I suppose. Even have the hunters involved with being forced to help so they wouldn't face justice for their crimes. Maybe even be led by Kraven's son or daughter in the game, where they were killed. If you follow like the entire sort of like net storyline, like you see that they all basically just killed each other. Maybe a war within the hunters where each kid of Kraven is warring against each other for the crown of head of the family and using New York as their battleground. That shit could have been fucking sick if the direction went in that sort of area, right? It could have been really cool. Mysterio's story could have been more interesting if it was grander on a large city scale, but it felt more like busy work. You just go into like these little these rooms just to be in these VR stuff. I think it's cool, don't get me wrong. I thought the missions and like the setup and everything was cool, but again, it just felt like mini games. It didn't feel like an actual sort of like side mission or anything that went in a good direction or went into a direction that's super interesting, besides Mysterio not being the villain after all, and him actually being a good person now. The game gives us a bit more meat when it comes to the combat as well, but not much that I feel like they could have done. Honestly, like there's a lot of instances where they just go ahead and they just add a little bit more to the formula, and that's it. Like, it's not anything spectacular. In classic Spider-Man 2, what you could have done to the villains, like stringing them up on like the lampposts and, you know, doing a bunch of crazy shit, like crazy maneuvers you could do. Here it just seems like they just sort of make things like sort of like cool, sort of like, I don't know, like the whole kicking somebody like in the wall thing that's pretty fire. But there's not that many, like, you know, animations that are really super cool like classic Spider-Man 2. Like, they added so much shit that you could do. It was like insane. That, along with like the parry, which is fine. It doesn't really add much in terms of combat. It's just something else to do. Like, you know, I want to be more flashy, you know. Sure, we have some abilities that are cool, especially with Miles. They are cool, hands down, honestly. But I just feel like they could have done more with the combat and made it more complex, where you can have like your own sort of gameplay, your own sort of style when fighting criminals. Like, your whole style could have been more about gadgets, or more your style could have been more about the abilities, or the style could have been like the different maneuvers that you like to do mixed together, and it could have been really fucking sick, right? And I just think it's a shame. I just think it's a shame that they didn't do as much as I thought they would. Even the gadgets were changed. I prefer the older gadgets from the first game, but they should have let us choose what to add and what to replace in terms of gadgets. Even the special suits abilities are missing, and, you know, that added some fun variety to the combat as well. Spider-Man 1 hit the scene with great visuals, story, and gameplay, but I feel like Spider-Man 2 was a step in another direction instead of being built on top of Spider-Man 1, if that makes any sense. Like, Spider-Man 2 is just a different version of Spider-Man 1 instead of a 100% upgrade from 1, if again, if that makes any sense. Saving some decent story bits for DLC isn't doing the game any favors, the combat not being as insane as people would expect, as, like, you know, essentially being the same but just with different enemy types and a parry, and finally the game just feels so safe. Which can be fine if the stories being told are interesting. Unfortunately for Miles, a bit of his missions are absolutely ass, and the only one I really liked was the music one. Honestly, I love that one. That shit was fucking baller. But if Spider-Man 1 is a 10 out of 10, I believe it's a 10 out of 10. Spider-Man 2 is a 9 out of 10. I just feel like none of the things that was given to us hit us as hard as the first game, and just much of the second game was pretty goddamn cool. Don't get me wrong. The Venom King and Black stuff, Craven, all baller. Maybe it's execution that wasn't really the best here, but hey, Spider-Man 2 is still a semi-perfect game, at least for me. But I feel like they need to step more towards the direction of Spider-Man 1, and, you know, a little like experiment with their storytelling a bit, and not be like involved with a certain company out there. If you know what I'm talking about, you know what I'm talking about. So that'll be me, honestly. That's been my thoughts on Spider-Man 2. Really looking forward to the next batch of DLCs for the game. Just hope the DLCs add, you know, some more really cool shit that I would like to see, and would have expected all that to be in the base game. So I'm expecting Carnage. I'm expecting Silk stuff, and we'll see, I guess. Stay healthy mentally, emotionally, and physically. Like, comment, subscribe. Hope you enjoy the video. Tell me your thoughts, and have a great day. Later.